Welcome to another episode of the Build and Scale Boldly podcast. I am so excited to have Penelope Jane Smith joining us here today. And she is someone who was actually introduced to me through a female entrepreneur who was in a mastermind with her for seven-figure entrepreneurs. And so I'm so excited to have her. She's actually an expert in financial freedom and has spent over 20 years teaching women entrepreneurs specifically how to build passive income and how to get to financial freedom in 5 years or less. And we have a lot in common. So I know this is going to be a really fun interview. And we're really going to be focusing a lot on financial freedom, on financial education, and how to build up your wealth as a female entrepreneur. So welcome, Penelope. It's so exciting to have you here.
Thank you so much, Leti. This is going to be a juicy conversation. Like, we're diving into some areas that I don't even normally get to talk about and touch on, but are so real. And I love that you and I have all these connection points, like our affinity with Japan and just understanding what it means to both build in real estate, build in business, balance it with family. Like there's so much. So I'm thrilled to be here, and it's going to be a juicy conversation.
Yes, it will be. So, for those who don't know you, can you tell them a little bit of your story and how you ended up being an educator in financial freedom?
Oh, sure. Well, I actually have, I guess, unfortunately or unfortunately, I have a pretty dramatic money story. So I was teaching in Japan, actually, and thinking about what I wanted to do when I came back to the United States. And I just stumbled upon Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. It was in this little train station in Kisarazu. They had this one little rack of books in English. I'm like, what is this purple book? If you're seeing this as a video, I'm wearing purple. You're like, clearly she's attracted to purple. Um, so it's purple books that Rich Dad Poor Dad, what the rich teach their kids and the poor don't, and middle class don't. And I was like, that's interesting. I started reading to it, and I bought it. And that in itself was kind of a bold move, because it was like $50 20 years ago. So it's like, imagine buying a paperback book for $100. Like, that's a lot, to spend on a book. But I was just fascinated, and I inhaled it. And that was when I first heard the term passive income. And I was like, why am I just hearing about this now in my 20s? Why has nobody ever told me about this before? Why is nobody talking about this? Like, what the actual F, And so I was fascinated, and I decided to study everything I could. I would go to the English bookstore in Tokyo every chance I got, and just come back with all the books I could carry on everything from accounting to real estate to stocks to business incorporations, like just everything, anything related to wealth building and money and business and investing. And I distilled it down to this idea that I wanted to learn how to invest in real estate, learn how to invest in general, build wealth, become financially free, and then teach other people how. So that's where the core idea started. So when I came back to the United States, I got my real estate license. I became a loan officer, helping people get mortgages. And then I went on to eventually run the mortgage division of another company. And then I felt comfortable investing in my own real estate. So starting with $10,000 of my own money, over the next 4 years, I turned that into over $6 million in real estate. So I was on track to be financially free, to be able to retire by the time I was 31, which is amazing, right? It's amazing how you can build wealth in real estate like that. And then the real estate market crashed in 2008. And I got caught up in the global financial crisis. And in what felt like overnight, my equity was wiped out. We were in contract for this one building that was going to be like a $400,000 payday. And then I was going to pay off some other buildings that would cash flow. And like, I had my whole plan. And then they pulled out at the last possible second. The values tanked. And from that moment, I was like scrambling to try to keep it all together. And I couldn't. And so what felt like overnight, the dominoes just kind of came crashing down, and my perfect credit score was ruined. I ultimately lost my home to foreclosure. I was masochistic enough to go to the foreclosure auction on my own home. And the little real estate investor guys, they're like all huddled around the guy with the clipboard, and they're like, hey, this house is in Benicia, Bob. You like Benicia, right? And the clipboard person announced, okay, so this one's in Benicia. The borrower's name is Penelope. And all of a sudden, it just hit me. I'm like, I'm losing my home. Say my name right. It's Penelope. Don't be calling me Penelope, And I just realized like I'm just a number to this person. I'm not even a, I'm not even a human being. I'm not even a person in this situation. I'm losing my home, and they're just like, ooh, like trying to pick up a deal, which I can't blame them for that. That's what real estate investors do. But it just like really the weight of the whole situation hit me, and I just went like shaking back to my car. And from that moment, I was terrified I was going to come home and find the locks changed and my pets trapped inside, and the electricity got turned off. I couldn't afford to get it turned back on. Everything in the fridge was ruined. It was just a mess. And then like right around that time when I'm in the middle of losing everything, and then I was also ultimately forced to declare bankruptcy. So I went from millions of dollars to losing my home, going bankrupt. In the middle of all of that, I got invited to a high level mastermind on Necker Island, which is Branson's private island in the Caribbean. It was a $50,000 investment, Leti, for this 6-day mastermind. And if there was ever a moment where I could say, like, I can't afford to do that, everyone would have agreed with me. It would have been then, right? Like, I had no credit. My credit was trashed. I had no income. I had no savings. Like, I was going bankrupt. The only thing I had was this strong intuitive hit that I was supposed to be there. They announced the dates for the mastermind, and it started on my birthday. And it was like, how some people talk about having an out of body experience, kind of leaving their body. I felt like I had an in body experience. Like it was like I felt like a silver energy like coming into my body, and it was almost like I heard a voice saying, "I'm supposed to be there. You're supposed to be there." And I'm like that made no sense. That made no sense. But I was like, okay, let me look at that, right? And we could talk about like what I did from there. But the bottom line is I made it work, and it might be good to talk about it actually, because I know people who are interested in investing, whether that's real estate or businesses or whatever, uh, coming up with the money is a thing, right? So I did make it work, came up with $50,000 in 4 days, and I went to Necker Island. And that was the beginning of turning everything around. I didn't know exactly what was going to happen. I was just trusting that intuitive hit. And I was like, I don't know what else I'm going to do, but this is like clearly I'm having this guidance. And on Necker Island, the facilitator of that group announced publicly that he wanted to win a Nobel Prize for single-handedly turning the economy around. And that really inspired me. I started sitting with this question of what could I do to single-handedly turn the global economy around? And so I'm sitting there on this billionaire's private island one night where everybody else is having a casino night thing down in the main house. I went to the very top point of the island, which is this little platform called the Crow's Nest. And I'm sitting there with the warm Caribbean breeze in my hair, and I'm sitting with this question. And I got an answer. I got the download. Can I share what I came up with? Awesome. So I realized that like everyone has their own personal economy. And that may or may not have anything to do with the economy at large. So my personal economy was in the tank, right? I was losing everything. I was going bankrupt. My credit was getting shredded. But there were other people on Necker Island having their best year in business ever. And I'm like, wow, look at that. So I figured if I could support enough individual entrepreneurs to create their own personal economy of abundance, then eventually we'd hit a tipping point, and that would shift the economy of the community, the area, the world. And so I started making microloans to women entrepreneurs in Asia, Africa, South America, because I wanted to have a positive global impact right off the bat. And I started working with women on how to, get their money stuff together, because that was something that I was really good at. Obviously, I was missing some pieces, right? I didn't know how to manage cash flow, but I learned, I harvested a lot of lessons from the real estate crash. And so fortunately, now my business is pretty awesome. I'm able to make 7 figures doing what I love while only working about 24 hours, 25 hours a week. So I have plenty of time to be with my little ones. And I don't even have to run my business, right? Because my investments can pay for my lifestyle. So I get to do that from a place of passion and life purpose and joy. And that's what I want for everyone, which is why, I'm doing this business. So like when I was on Necker Island, I even, I don't think I told you this, Letty, but I actually shaved my entire head bald. Like not even just like stubble, but like completely chrome dome bald. and if you can see me on video, my hair's pretty long. This is how I've worn it most of my life. So completely gone as a ritual to let go of the trauma of the past and the real estate crash and like rebirth myself into this new future wealthy self that's financially free and has this abundant, prosperous life. And just as the last bit of hair came off, it started raining. I'm like, oh my God, it's like the rebirth and the baptism. And I took my hair down to the ocean and I threw it to just be, a symbol of just releasing all of that. And now, I'm turning 50 this year. I'm fully living that vision of my future self, that future self that was rebirthed. Like that's me now. And so for my 50th birthday, as you know, I want to go back to Necker Island and celebrate my birthday there again and go back to the place of my rebirth, and I actually invited Leti, but she can't come. But it's going to be awesome.
Oh, gosh, what an incredible story. And there's so much I want to pull out. So, first of all, I want to highlight, Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I think is something that everybody should read for sure. It's such an incredible reframing of how you think about your time and your money. And I know we're going to talk about that more, but such a phenomenal book. And it's so cool that it started your journey, actually started my journey into real estate too. I think probably a ton of people got interested in real estate because they read that book and then saw that Robert Kiyosaki, was renting out little properties and making cash flow. When you lost all of that in 2008, what kind of main takeaways did you do when you rebuilt your real estate portfolio? Because I know you've built it now since. Like, what are the things, like maybe one or two things you want people to know that you learned during that you would want them to know going forward?
Oh, absolutely. I've harvested so many lessons. And this is why I'm so passionate about supporting other women entrepreneurs with their money stuff, because I have lived through some people's worst nightmares financially. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And so I can help you avoid or help people avoid some of those terrible and painful mistakes that I've made. And if you're listening to this or watching this and you've faced financial challenges in your own life, I can show you how you can like rebuild and rise like a phoenix from the ashes, right? So my number one most life-changing lesson, Leti, was how to manage cash flow. I didn't realize that was a thing. And what I mean by that is like managing the day-to-day cash coming in, going out, because I, I felt like I was very good on analyzing the deal and figuring out like what we would probably sell it for and, what it would cost to hold it if it was a negative cash flow thing that we're planning to like fix up and sell or something like that. So I felt like I was very good at crunching all the numbers, but I didn't realize that like day-to-day cash on hand, like managing that flow, I didn't realize that was a thing. I didn't realize that was a skill set I didn't have. And so even in my business, I run a 7-figure coaching and training company that specializes in supporting women entrepreneurs to become financially free in 5 years or less. And we do these events, usually like three times a year. We lead an event called Financial Freedom 101, where we give women all of the skills and tools and systems they need to become financially free. So over the 3 days, we build out all their money systems, right? So that's the rhythm and flow of my business is we have these 3 events. And then some of those people at the events decide that they want to hire us for ongoing coaching and mentorship. So what happens when you have a business like that is you have a bunch of money come in at once, and then it kind of like trickles off. And then a bunch of money comes in, and then it kind of trickles off. And so I would run into this scenario where I'm like, okay, we just did, $540,000 in sales. Why do I not have the money to pay the retreat center right now? Like, where did that money go? And so like understanding the cash in, cash out, that was huge. And even with real estate, this was what was so crazy. Like, because I didn't have a plan for managing the cash, I just paid whoever screamed loudest. I was just completely living from my like limbic lizard brain, like, woo, and my prefrontal cortex, where you make good decisions, was completely offline. So I was like, oh, sure, I'm just going to pay this person and not think about like how I'm going to buy food. So for example, a collector from Washington Mutual called and got me to cry. And I agreed to pay $500 a month on my home equity line. And being a real estate girl, how insane that is, because I wasn't paying the first mortgage. So the property was going to foreclosure anyway. So why am I giving this guy my food money? My electricity money. Remember I said my electricity got turned off? Like, if I had understood how to manage cash flow, because I had positive cash flow properties, like, why did I let them to go to foreclosure? Because I was insane, you know? And so what happened was, because I didn't have a plan, um, I paid whoever yelled loudest. And if I had just had a plan for managing cash flow, man, I might have been able to keep my house, Letty. I definitely, yeah. I mean, I like, in the bankruptcy they might have taken them, but yeah, they didn't have to go to foreclosure. They were supporting themselves. I'm embarrassed sharing this with a real estate investor, but like, this is the bad decisions you can make when you are not thinking clearly and you're in financial crisis and you're just like, ah! Right? That's the power of having a system and being able to follow that system that you set up when you were thinking clearly. So yeah, I definitely would have been able to keep the lights on, right? And so that has been probably the most life changing, is actually creating a system for managing cash flow, seeing the actual cash that's coming in, the actual cash that's coming out. And now that I have a system for that, if there's going to be a shortfall, I can see it months ahead of time. I'm like, oh, in 4 months, we're going to be $3,000 short. Well, that gives me a whole hell of a lot of time to do something about it, right?
So just to summarize, so you had some cash flowing properties. Ideally, you would have had all cash flowing properties, right? And that's such an important piece of real estate investing for anyone who's doing that, is to know that you have cash flowing properties, but also that you're watching the operating cash, right? And that you're also projecting months out what your cash position is going to be with operating cash in whatever business you're in, so you don't get to a space where you don't have any cash in the bank, because that's when you get into the space of really feeling a lot of scarcity, and that's when you make those terrible decisions, right?
Exactly. And cash flow, like that, the cash, the actual cash, like that's the lifeblood of your business.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that's great about real estate is it's very forgiving. Like, if you can't rent a property, maybe you can sell it or lease option it, or if you can't sell it right away, maybe you rent it, or there's a lot of different things you can do. And there's so many different ways you can make money. There's like forced appreciation. There's like paying down the equity. There's so many creative things. But if you don't have the cash to cover everything, that becomes a problem very fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I know people who also got hit in the 2008 downturn, and they had enough cash that they were able to hold on even through that, and then ultimately sell their properties later when they recovered. Unfortunately, that wasn't me. And it wasn't because I didn't have cash reserves. I'm not like, I had that concept, like keep cash on hand. But in terms of like the day to day with everything, I wasn't managing it well enough to be able to handle that level of, even then, I don't know if I would have been able to handle that level of downturn, but I would have been able to make a better plan and I would have been in a much better position. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and so that also reminds people to, think about what happens if there is a financial downturn, both in your real estate portfolio, but also your stock portfolio, and plan for it, ahead of time, and have different scenarios, so that if it does happen, if the stock market loses 40, 50% of value, or your real estate drops, 30, 40, 50%, that you're going to be able to make it through. So let's talk about now this Necker Island thing, because you were at a position where you were really broke and you invested in yourself, the 50K. So how would you talk somebody through that today, and how would you think about it for yourself today? Would you make that, I mean, obviously the decision worked out well, but how would you think through it differently, with all the experience and all the people you've worked with over time? Or would you just think through it exactly the same, trust your intuition?
I mean, I do think that if you are very connected with your intuition, there is something to be said for trusting it, right? And I really didn't have a better idea. Um, so there was that part. I think today, a lot of times what I ask myself, because you don't necessarily know what your return on some of these things is going to be until it happens. And so I ask myself questions like, what would I have to get out of this to make it worth it? You know? Or what do I think this is going to do for me? Because I think a lot of people get really focused on what's this going to cost me, and they lose sight of what it's going to make them or get out of it, right? And so they're kind of like tripping over dollars to save pennies, and that's not great. So it's like, what would I have to get out of this to make it worthwhile, to get a good return? And does that seem likely, like I invested, like $20,000 in up leveling my website. That felt like a lot of money at the time. Honestly, it still feels like a lot of money. I'm like, God, just for a website? You can do a free website with WordPress. Why do you need to pay 20 grand? But I thought, if all this does is help me get a couple more clients, it's worth it. And that seemed pretty reasonable because my old website was like really outdated. And now my new website, I love it so much. I want to marry it. Um, and yeah, so that's kind of how I look at it, is like, what do I realize, what would I have to get out of this? Does that seem doable? you know so I didn't ask that question in Necker Island because I didn't necessarily know to. It was more just like, I feel like this is what I need to do. I didn't have a better idea. Let me see if I can find a way to do it. And so I told my inner critic to just go take a coffee break, and I'm like, let me just come up with at least 10 ideas, no matter how crazy and insane, to make this happen. And what I love about doing that exercise, which I would still do and still do to this day, is it gets you in a place of resourcefulness instead of contraction. So if you just say, I can't afford it, it's like Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. And so when you say, I can't afford it, your brain just, shuts down. You're in this like contracted, not resourceful place. But when you shift it to how can I afford it, you start seeing possibilities and getting ideas and downloads, and you get into a more resourceful place. So I made a list. I was like, well, what could I sell for $50,000? Maybe I could come up with some cool VIP program and attract a client in the next 4 days and get them to wire me the money. Or maybe I could sell, 5 programs for $10,000 or 10 programs for $5,000 or 50,000 things for $1. So I like broke it down by the math to see like which of those felt the most realistic. And then the program came with some bonuses. I thought maybe I could sell the bonuses. One of the bonuses was something I had already paid for. I thought maybe they would let me apply that towards the tuition since I had already bought that program. I had a little bit of land that they weren't taking in the bankruptcy. I thought maybe I could sell that, sell my car. And I realized no one in the right way no one would lend me money, right? Because my credit was in the tank and I didn't have any reliable income. But I thought if somebody believed enough in my future ability to make income, maybe they would be willing to sponsor me to go. And I couldn't agree to a set payment or interest rate, but maybe I could give them a percentage of my income, whatever income that is. And so I made all these ideas. And what I love about that is now you're in this possibility consciousness. So even if I hadn't gone to Necker Island, maybe I'm like, you know what, this is a really good idea for a $50,000 program. I'm still going to make that program and sell it. Right. So there's like no downside to doing the exercise. And then in my case, a combination of those things worked. So I was able to apply what I'd paid for the bonus to the thing. I was able to sell another one of the bonuses for 5 grand. So that brought it down. And then I found a sponsor and I shopped that to a few people. So I could have had like 20 different sponsors kicking in a little bit, but it was one person that's like, yeah, I'll just do the remainder. And I agreed to pay them 5% of my income until I had paid them back 150% of what they lent me. I'm like, I don't know how long that's going to take. Might take 5 years, might take 50, but like, I'll keep doing that. And I am so grateful to that person, Leti. I still send them extra money now and then just to say thank you, because like, if I hadn't gone to Necker Island, I don't even know if I would be on this planet right now. It was so painful to owe people money and not being able to pay my bills as agreed. Like, all I could think of was, maybe if I died, my life insurance would pay those people back. Because at the time, I just didn't see how else I could do it. So that's where I was at the time. That's heavy. And if I hadn't gone to Necker Island, like, I don't know what I would have done. So that was kind of the process I went through, the thought process then, and like how it's shifted a little bit now. But I still like doing that exercise. And it's just that added layer of like, what would I have to get out of it? Right.
The how can I question is such a powerful question that I hope everyone hears from you. It's so many times that I have thought about something that seemed impossible. And when I sat down and said, how can I? The creative ideas, they really do come to you incredibly. One thing that I want to know also is when this shift happened for you, you did it from a space of service, right? You had that download and then you started serving others,
Mm.
right? And I suspect that's part of what made it work too. It wasn't about you, it was now about others. So can you talk about that? Is this a pattern you've seen in people is, when they lead with contribution, when they lead from love for their customer or their, because you're in a lot of, rooms with seven-figure mastermind people, right? With seven-figure people who own businesses. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, most of the people that I interact with love what they do and they really care about making a difference. Like the reason they started their business was they wanted to provide this service to the world. And for me, one of my highest values is freedom. And I'm like, man, if I if I don't want to like work at some corporate job for the next 40 years, I bet there's other people that don't want to do that either. So I was like, people need to know this and I want to share it and all of that. So I think for a lot of the people I work with, it does come from that place of passion. And one of like the number one mindset shift that got me from how can I kill myself so it doesn't look like suicide so that the life insurance pays my investors back. It's a horrible question. Um, to I shifting that to how can I change the global economy? That's like a much more empowering a question, right? And like you said, shifting from I mean, I guess even then it was in service for others because I wanted them to have the money. Like them having the money was more important to me than my own life at the time. But it was like rather than worrying about myself, it was like how can I support other people, you know? And then having the business triple from there, that was like a happy byproduct, right? So I think you still need to have like a decent business model, a decent revenue model, and an idea of how your business can make money. But I do think if you are a heart-centered business owner, passion-driven business owner, then the business itself becomes an expression of your values, an expression of your gifts, an expression of who you are, right? Like when I post videos on YouTube, I don't have to make YouTube videos. I've paid tens of thousands of dollars to make these beautiful YouTube videos to provide to the world for free. And it's because it's part of my expression. I like to do my hair all fancy and my makeup and wear all sorts of my fun goddessy clothing. And it's my art, it's my gift, you know? So I think that's a very powerful place to come from. That said, I don't want to be down on anybody that owns a business that makes money just because it makes money. I don't think that's bad or anything. Like my husband, he's not a business owner. He has a job and he very much works to live. He does not live to work. He's like, the reason I show up is they pay me, you know? And for me, I'm like, I would do this for free. And in fact, when COVID hit and people were freaking out, I provided free group financial coaching each week because I was like, people are hurting, people need help. And yeah, I think that that's a powerful place to be if you're that type of person. And if you just like run an HVAC company, not because you're like passionate about HVAC, but because it makes money, like that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing for women to have money because I also know women will contribute to community in a different way, and money just buys you choices. It's a wonderful thing for the people you serve as well as for you as a business owner, and you take a lot of risk also as a business owner. As we're talking through this, I mean, you've seen a lot of seven-figure plus business owners, and yeah, we take on a lot of risk to build our businesses, of our time and then also our finances. And question, so now you've had this experience of building this, multi seven figure business and investing in real estate and then teaching all these people to invest, right? With the primary goal of passive income, right? Income that's going to support you month to month. How do you think about how all of those go together? And like, when do you focus? So when do you stay diverse? Like, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I think that first of all, like if you are setting up your business, if you're running your business, that's probably going to be where you put most of your time and energy. So when I talk about investing, like when I really think about investing, to me, that's getting your money working for you, right? So your business is still largely you working for money until you get to the point where you're just like a passive owner right? That could happen. But for most of us, like who did this because we love doing it, we want to provide service, all of this, that's probably still going to be at least a little bit tied to your time. And so investing is like, okay, if I think about my money as the most dedicated, loyal member of my team, then I'm going to go delegate the money to go invest and grow and work on something else while I'm working on this part. So it's very similar to hiring somebody to put you on life support, right? Where they're like doing your laundry and your groceries and your errands and your food prep and taking care of your kids some of the time. Like they're going and doing that so you can focus on the higher leverage things in your business. And it's kind of the same thing with the money. It's like you go work and multiply and grow for me over there. So I just did a interview with, not an interview. I did a show, like a web TV show with Jubilee. Do you know who those guys are? They have a Jubilee Media. They have a great YouTube channel and they do all these videos around provoking human connection. And so they'll take topics and have people, anyway, all sorts of stuff. So they did a show on long-term investors versus short-term investors and what's the difference and how do you look at things, and you're explaining your point of view with the idea that hopefully you find some connection points and middle ground. And when the episode actually goes live, if it does go live, I'll send you the link and you can put it in the show notes. But I was a long-term investor. All of the short-term investors, they all talked about how much time they spent on their thing. One person was doing, trading speculation markets. Another person was doing like stock day trading. Another person was trading crypto. And they were like, oh yeah, you got to put in all this time. I'm like, if you're putting 8 hours a day into this thing, that's not investing to me. That's your job, right? And that's fine. But that's not how I think about investing. So I think as a business owner, you're putting most of your time into your business, and then you still want to strike a balance between investing time, energy, money in your business and then also outside of your business. Because even if you are growing your business as an asset that you want to sell someday, which some people do, I think that it's highly risky to have that be your only plan, because like 9 out of 10 businesses listed right now aren't selling, right? You're like, okay, I got a 1 in 10 chance, and even then, a lot of times they're not selling for the multiples that you might assume. Like the average multiple on Biz by Sell is like 2.8. So what that means is you can sell your business for about 2.8 times your profit. Technically, it's your seller's discretionary income or EBITDA if you're more, okay, I don't want to go too big into this, but let's just call it your profit. So let's say you're netting $100,000, right? You could sell the business for $280,000. That's probably not enough for you to be financially free unless you want to live. I mean, maybe if you're living in Bali or Thailand or something, maybe. So I think that that's a problem. The siren song for entrepreneurs of always investing back in your business is that you have a lot of control there. Your business. You know your business better than anyone else. You have control, you have some degree of certainty because like I know, okay, if I put this much into Facebook ads and my Facebook ads are converting at this, I should be able to get this many clients, or if I hire this person, I would think that they could allow me to do this. Like you can make some really good educated guesses. And the other thing is, your business is probably going to give you a really big return on investment. Although that it also typically includes your time. But like, for example, the mastermind where I met Sunny, who introduced me to Leti, that's, I don't know, like 12 or 13 grand a year plus traveling to go to the masterminds and stuff. So that's an investment, right? So let's call it $20,000. But I met one person there that brought 100 people to my workshop, and I had like 6 people sign up for the $20,000 level of our mentorship program. So that's like 120,000 in revenue from a $20,000 investment. So that's an insane return on investment. If you could put $20,000 into something and get 120,000 out, that's very high, right? Like even for real estate, that's very high. Tell me if I'm wrong. So I think that
it's relationships. Relationships are like the best investment you can make.
Yeah. So I think it becomes almost like maybe addictive, to keep investing back in your business. And there's also this feeling of like, I know my business. Whereas if you're going to go learn how to invest in real estate or learn how to invest in the stock market, now maybe you don't have that same level of mastery in that area and it feels uncomfortable to go back and be a beginner again and have to learn about it, right? So you're like, let me just stick with what I know. So I think that in the beginning, you're mostly focused on your business, but you still want to, right from the get-go, start moving a little bit out of your business as soon as you can. And even if it's just like $25 a month, $50 a month, and start putting it into growing what I call your golden goose. Do you remember the story of the goose that laid the golden eggs?
I do.
So you want to have a big enough golden goose that you can ultimately live off the golden eggs sustainably without killing the golden goose, right? And so it's just like you're putting it into somewhere where it's just going to grow and you're never going to spend the principal. That's the idea. It's like you're creating your own golden goose. So you could start with a savings account, and just have like $25 a month automatically going into a savings account. Ideally a high yield savings account, so you're making some decent interest on that money that's sitting there until you have a better idea. But that's an easy way to start. And then you have your baby gosling, and you're growing it, and then you keep going from there. But what you want to do, what that does is when you are investing consistently every month, you're building that muscle, you're building that investment muscle. And when you look at the statistics behind like what allows somebody to become financially free, 78% of it is just they invested. They put money from like what we call the make money world into the grow money world. So that consistent savings, that is like most of the game, right? So 74% of the game is just putting money over into the investment world. And then you can automate it in the beginning, right? So we can talk about that if you want. But I would put some amount in because you're building that muscle, you're building that consistency. And then it also nurtures your identity as an investor. I think most of us didn't grow up thinking of themselves as an investor, right? That's actually a really empowering identity if you think about it, right? But the minute you put $25 into something and you're like, this is my investment money, you're an investor. An investor is somebody that invests, and you just did that. And now you're doing it consistently. So I would say start with whatever you can and then increase it. And then ultimately, as you have the bandwidth, then you can start getting into bigger things like buying real estate or businesses or whatever. Part of that's going to depend on how much time you want to put in your business versus how much time you want to put in that and what's going to give you the higher return. But I would say you do want to start investing consistently as soon as humanly possible, because the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago and the next best time is today, right?
Absolutely. How do you think about if your focus is on cash flow, right?
Mhm.
And obviously, real estate, you can see how that creates cash flow, but how do you think about creating cash flow in the stock market? Or are you just going to be okay with it's going to increase in value over time?
Ooh, I love it. I love it. I love it. How do you think about cash flow in the market? Yeah, that's so good, because when I talk to people about the financial freedom formula, like what is it that you need to be financially free? It's PI is greater than E. Your passive income is greater than your expenses, right? Your expenses, that's everything from your rent or mortgage to your yoga classes and green smoothies, like everything it costs to be you. So you want to know what does it cost to be you? What does it cost to support the lifestyle that you want? Because then you know how much passive income you need, right? So that's a step that most people don't even take, is like getting that clarity. They're like, I need $1 million or I need $20 million. They just like pull out of the thin air, which is fine. But like when you know this is the life I want to lead, this is how much it costs to support that life, then you know exactly how much passive income you need and you can build a plan to get there. When people talk about, then people say, okay, passive income, I want passive income. So one of the most common mistakes about passive income that leaves even smart, savvy investors with huge money leaks in their portfolios is thinking that passive income has to come in the form of a regular dividend or check. Mm-hmm. So imagine that that's your mindset. What are you going to do? You're going to look at investing in things that pay a dividend or have a yield, like bonds, dividend stocks, annuities. Those things all give you like an amount, right? Or even, and I don't know if you disagree with me here, even a cash flowing rental property, right? They're like, I need a property that's going to give me like really good positive cash flow, which sounds great. The only problem with that is some of those things are going to slow down your ability to build wealth and become financially free quicker. So it's if you want to hang a beautiful canvas painting on your wall and you need to put a nail into the wall, what's the right tool to get that nail into the wall?
Hammer.
It's a hammer, right? Boom, boom, easy. But let's say you can't find a hammer and you're like, okay, well, let me grab a screwdriver and I'll hold the metal part and I'll try to like hammer it in with the plastic part. And it's not like that can't work. It's just not as effective. It's slower. And so that's what a lot of investors are doing. Like when I look at people's, portfolios and mix and how they're approaching it, is it's just massively slowing down their ability to build wealth. And so when you think about your financial freedom journey, there's a little bit more of a growth phase where you're like growing the golden goose. And there's more of an income phase where you now have enough golden eggs that you're living off the golden eggs. That's not hard and fast, but if you think about it, it makes sense because even just in real estate, some markets are going to be better for cash flow. Some markets are going to be better for growth, right? So if I'm just focused on cash flow as a new investor, I might buy something in Kansas City that has a really good ROI in terms of like, month to month cash flow, but maybe it's not going to appreciate much. Or even like I had some properties in Bismarck and Mandan, North Dakota, like the appreciation is very minimal, but the cash flow is good, right? So those are really good, like golden egg passive income investments. But in the very beginning of your journey, an extra $50, $100, $200 a month in passive income isn't going to be what you need. You don't really need that income right now. You can probably just reinvest it. So if you're in the stage where you can just reinvest everything, then you may as well put it in something that's going to grow the golden goose faster so you can pull off golden eggs later. So that's the context. That's probably a longer answer than you wanted, but specifically to your question, how do you pull passive income from the stock market investments?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So this is such an interesting thing because I'm working with a financial advisor now, and it's, all this time we've been doing our own wealth. And one of the things they did was when they looked at our net worth, they said, okay, this is the money you have in the stock market. We're going to give it a certain return, right? In terms of passive income. Right. And so they, assigned it somewhere between 4 to 7%. They assigned to all of our things that aren't actually producing cash flow, but kind of in the same philosophy that you're talking about, which is, when you're in this phase of pulling out money from that, then that will be the cash that you're going to be pulling out, right? Every month or every quarter or whatever. And so they assigned it a cash flow value, even though it doesn't actually produce cash flow. And so that's
that deal.
and that was the first time I really saw anyone do that, and so it's a really kind of way to think about how investments in the stock market that you're doing right now that don't produce cash flow, how you can still measure an amount of cash flow and see how it will become when you get there, when you do need it.
I love that you're talking about that. I almost never hear anybody talk about this. They just like accumulate, and they have no idea what those stocks or funds or Bitcoin or whatever, they have no idea what that translates to in terms of passive income. So they just hoard it, and then they actually like never want to spend it, or they might spend too much. And so what that cash flow percentage that you were talking about, that's called your withdrawal rate. Your withdrawal rate. And so for stuff that's like appreciating assets, like if you're investing in stocks or funds or crypto or whatever, because you think it's going to grow over time, then one way you translate into the passive income is you assign it a withdrawal rate, and you want your withdrawal rate to be a little bit less than what it's actually making, right? Because you want to leave some in case the market's down or inflation, or just leave a little bit in. And so if you just invest in the overall stock market, the overall stock market has compounded at about like 5.3% ish. So that's like how it's growing and compounding. So if you have a 4% withdrawal rate, a lot of financial advisors call this the 4% rule. So that's super common in the financial planning industry. So if you're making 5.3 and you're pulling off 4, it's leaving a little bit in there. And then with that approach, your risk of running out of money over a 30-year retirement is very low. That's where the 4% rule comes. So based on your investment strategy, you set a withdrawal rate that like matches that so that you're pulling off a little bit less than what it's actually making. Does that make sense?
Yes. And it's interesting too, just during this conversation, I see one weakness that they don't really weight the risk. So for example, even with my crypto assets, they gave it a certain withdrawal rate, which is very similar to the one they were doing with my stock index funds, right? And so I think that you also have to think about the risk and the volatility of the different elements as well when you're doing that, if you're going to be doing it yourself. How do you
Yeah.
think through that?
So the way I look at it is it always starts with your strategy, right? So a lot of people want to say like, well, are stocks good? Is crypto good? Is bonds good? Is gold good? I'm like, that's going to really depend on your strategy. Like if you listen to Dave Ramsey, who's a, financial coach guy that has a podcast and books and stuff, like he will say gold is a terrible investment. Never own gold, right? The reason he says that is because his strategy is to just buy and hold something and like never sell it, basically. Just start, and you start pulling off the 4% or whatever withdrawal rate. And it's true, like gold is not good for that strategy because the average historical return of gold is like about 3%, kind of helps hedge inflation. So for that reason, he's right for that strategy, right? For another strategy that like aligns with long-term economic cycles and like cycles into gold when gold is going up and cycles out of gold when gold is going down, then gold is a great investment for that strategy, right? So that's why you want to look at the overall strategy, and then based on all of the information you have on that strategy and its historical performance. And they'll always say like historical performance doesn't guarantee future performance, which is true, but it's also the only information you have to go on. And so you're like, okay, this strategy has averaged this over the last 150 years. So let's use that as our best guess, and let's pull a withdrawal rate that is less than that. So crypto hasn't been around 150 years, so you look at the way Bitcoin moves, or the way Ethereum moves, or the way the overall crypto market moves. What do we realistically expect over time? Lower withdrawal rate. And the withdrawal rate should allow for the volatility like you're talking about. So the 4% rule does that. That's based on a lot of research on the overall market. So yeah, that's how you look at that. And that's one way to generate passive income from what we would call paper assets, not like a real oil drill or a real rental house, but like stuff that you can buy and sell in your brokerage account or retirement account in seconds. That's what we call paper assets, right? So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is some stuff does pay dividends. I wouldn't buy it for my investment strategy. Some people, their strategy is buy dividend stuff. Okay. For my investment strategy, I don't buy things for the dividend, but some of the things just give me dividends. So when you're in the growth phase and you're growing your golden goose, you're probably just reinvesting those dividends. In fact, in your brokerage account, you can probably just click a button, reinvest dividends. So it's just going back to growing the golden goose. But at some point, you could say, you know what, just give me the dividends. And that's another way it can make money. So you got the withdrawal rate, you got the dividends. And then if you want to, you could layer in other strategies, like for example, selling what's called a call option against assets that you own. That's called a covered call, when you're selling a call option on an asset that you already own. And a call option is similar to a lease option in real estate. It's like giving somebody the option to buy your stock or buy your asset for a certain price within a certain period of time. So if you want to lease option a house, maybe I pay you a $10,000 option fee to buy this house for $300,000 within 2 years, right? And then 2 years goes by, and I decide to buy the house, and I can buy it for $300,000. Even maybe it's gone up to 350, but I can still buy it for 300 because I gave you that option fee and I have that option. Or maybe I say, you know what, I don't want to buy it, and then it just goes back to you. You can do whatever you want with it, and you still get to keep that option fee, right? So it's the same thing. You can do the same thing with stock and funds. You can even do it like, let's say you own an index tracking fund. We can talk about what that is if you don't know. I'm pretty sure Leti knows. But you could sell a covered call option on your index tracking fund and get an instant guaranteed fee deposited into your account. That's called a premium. And then if they decide they want to buy it at that price, you would sell it to them and buy something else or buy it back. And if they didn't, you would just keep the option fee. So that's another way to add another income stream on top of these assets that you already own. So Now we're getting we're
Now we're
getting
getting into the nitty gritty, but I think the real takeaway
detailed.
here as a woman entrepreneur, like you got to understand finances and you can't just put all of your energy into your business. You need to also be investing, and you don't need to be an active investor per se, but like at least be passively investing and getting some diversification outside of your business, because
Mhm.
just putting all of your money into your business, it is higher risk, even though like how it works and all those pieces, like there's no
Yeah.
guarantees in life. So make sure that you are investing your money in multiple places so you can ultimately have cash flow. And I thought it was such an interesting discussion that I think a lot of people will be surprised about, is how you can assign a cash flow percentage return to assets that are not actually cash flowing. And just a reminder to everybody to be looking at your net worth with some frequency. I look at it quarterly. I don't know how often you look at it. Is it monthly that you look at your net worth?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Look at your net worth and look at all the ways that you have investments outside of your business, right? And I put my business with my EBITDA and my multiple in there, but I also put all of my different assets, and I'm getting a variety of alternative investments as well. Not just real estate, maybe you have some PE in there, and then of course you have your traditional index funds, but make sure that you're investing in lots of different assets and you educate yourself, because thinking that your spouse is going to take care of it, your husband's going to take care of it, like you need to know how to do this basic stuff. You and I both, one of our values is freedom, right? And if you're ever in a situation that you need to leave, you want to have that understanding of the finances, or understanding where your finances are and how you make money with investing, so you have that ultimate freedom to not have to have that on top of you, as well as everything else that goes along with leaving a relationship.
Yeah, and I want to be clear, like you don't have to become a full-time investor to make this work. You can put yourself on prosperity autopilot, set up auto transfers, set up auto investing, set it and forget it. And that's one of the things that I really like about having stock market investments in addition to real estate. Because I used to be all real estate all the time. I was like, don't even talk to me just about the stock market. That's basically just like gambling. I'm the kind of person that puts 25 cents into the slot machine. I lose. I'm like, I'm done. I'm not interested in losing money. That's not fun for me. But once you learn how to invest according to a strategy, you can automate that strategy. And that's really nice because on the overall spectrum of passive, even if you have, property manager, you still have to manage the manager. But when it comes to like those paper assets, it really is, as close to 100% passive as you can get, which is really nice. So it's nice to have that balance. And when Leti's talking about diversification, I see a lot of people being over diversified. Like they might own like 80 different ticker symbols in their account. And I'm like, okay, like that's going to give you decision fatigue. You're going to be not making great decisions. You're going to be like leaking and hemorrhaging money. But appropriate diversification is into a few different asset classes. So like, let's have some real estate. Let's have some stock, let's have maybe a little bit of silver, whatever meets your investment strategy. But like having some in a whole different asset class, like that's really smart, so you kind of add to it as you have the bandwidth for it. And that's going to be largely based on how big your account is, right? Because the learning and doing these things, it takes time. So if you're starting with $100, it's probably not worth spending 50 hours to like up your ROI and make $10. You'd be better off just getting another client and putting that money into the investment account until it gets big enough. And now I'm at the point where it's worth it to me to do some more like active investing things or less passive, like selling covered calls, like I mentioned, because I can make a ton of money. If I can make, $3,000 in an hour, like that's pretty good. That's worth it. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Just kind of wrapping up and thinking through the last question that I really wanted to chat with you about, making sure we have time for that. We talked about your Necker Island, and but I'd love to kind of hear if there are any other times in your journey that you've had really a challenge or a big issue that you had to make a bold decision in the face of, and like what you learned from making that bold decision that maybe everyone else thought was a little crazy, or maybe you were really concerned it wasn't going to go the way that you thought it would. How did you make that decision and what did you learn from it?
Mm. Yeah, that's great. I think as an entrepreneur, we're faced with a lot of those decisions, right? And so I would say a big one for me was like starting to hire a team to build my business back up after I had my first baby, because it used to be that like if I was going to host a small event, I could do everything on my own. I could set up my pipe and drape, and I could hit play on the boombox, and like I could do that on my own, maybe like enroll one volunteer, have 20 or 30 people there, and it was fine. But now that I had a baby, I'm like, Mama can't do that. Like I needed to hire support. And I was looking at, well, this is how much I make if I'm coaching versus this is how much I make if I'm just taking care of my kid. And I was like, if I can hire somebody for $20 an hour, I can make more than that. So it was scary committing to it, but I felt like I can probably make this work. And then I've had to do that. I mean, with like almost every hire, I'm like, woo, can I do that? And because I think what some people do is, which I think this is smart, I've just never been able to make it work for me, is they'll say like, okay, I want to hire somebody for, $5,000 a month. Let me start putting $5,000 a month aside so that I have that runway to hire them and I can prove that the business can hire them. And that makes a lot of sense to me. But usually what I do is I hire somebody I can't afford that expands the capacity and I can afford them. So
Exactly.
yeah, that just seems to be what works for me. And it's always scary. So for example, in COVID, I have an event-based business. COVID lockdown happened 1 week before my live event. I just put thousands of dollars into new AV equipment and I'm like, oh my God. And so obviously we didn't do the event because everything was in lockdown. But I did get an EIDL loan. So I could have used that loan to like just kind of keep me limping along, or I could hire a marketing director and see if we could really take off. And so I'm like, let me hire the marketing director with the EIDL money. So I'm like borrowing money to hire somebody, and we tripled our business. So in that case, it worked out really well. And that is it's a calculated risk because I've also had team members that don't work out sometimes, but that is how I approach it. And I think that those are some pretty big decisions at the time that I made.
Yeah, it's thinking of the salary as an investment, and the person should ideally bring in more money into your business. Either they're directly affecting revenue or they're freeing you up to be able to make more money. And you're right, sometimes it doesn't work out, right? Sometimes they're not the right fit for your company or they can't deliver. But it is a mindset shift to start seeing it not as money spent, but as an investment in growth, which it sounds like is how kind of how you.
Yeah, and I look at like, can they? I call it a productive expense. So yes, it's an expense, but they're producing more than what they're costing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're net ahead typically, and that's really easy if it's like a salesperson or marketing person because you can very clearly see how their activities equal more money. It's a little harder in terms of operations, but you can look at what is your time cost, like how much you're making divided by how much you are working, and that kind of gives you a overall average rate. So if somebody can take something off your plate for less than that, you're going to be ahead. And this is like one of the first, probably the first hire for most entrepreneurs is going to be actually like domestic support, life support, because you can hire somebody pretty inexpensively to run errands and clean your house and stuff like that. And that frees you up to go do those higher leverage things of marketing and sales and working with clients. So that's a really easy trade-off and a good first step for most people.
Absolutely. So this has been an amazing conversation. I love all the range of where we went. And yeah, of course, we didn't plan all of it, but that's always the fun part, is to have the surprise of where we end up going. Can you tell everyone how they can find out more about you, what you do, and who you serve?
Oh, absolutely. So I would say probably the next best thing to do listening to this is go to financialfreedomgift.com. And on that page, you can download your free copy of my Financial Freedom Formula ebook. So that's going to walk you through the 2 types of passive income, how to get more of each, and help you start building your custom financial freedom plan, which might include real estate, might include business, might include stock, but you're going to get clear on what is your magic number? What do you actually need? And then start building a plan to getting there. So it's a quick read, bite-sized but powerful. And then once you get the ebook, this is also a secret hack if you want to get a ticket to my Financial Freedom 101 online 3-day event, which could be a great next step in your continuing education. Because like I said, over the 3 days, we put all your money systems together so that your business becomes a vehicle for creating wealth, not just generating revenue. So we do dive into how to manage cash flow. You'll learn the exact systems that I use on the personal side, on the business side, like the stuff that if I had known I might have been able to keep my house, it is life changing. So, like, just for that part, I would come. But we also dive into your investment strategy, right? Including like, how do you run a completely passive investment strategy that where you're making like triple the return of the average investor without taking any time away from your business or life. Statistically, I can't promise a return, but like historical returns. So we go through all of that, like how to manage cash flow, how to create a money market system or money system, how to invest according to a strategy, and you put all those things together for 3 days. So that event is $1,497 on my website, which is fine. You can go buy a ticket and it's totally worth it, because if all it does is get you an extra million at retirement, totally worth 1,500. However, the secret hack I mentioned is if you download the ebook first, if you go to financialfreedomgift.com and download the ebook, you will get a link to attend Financial Freedom 101 for just a $97 seat deposit, which you get back at the event. So it's a full scholarship. So I would use that secret hack to get the ticket. So that'll save you the $1,500.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Penelope, so much for your time. It's always so much fun to get to talk to you. And yeah, I'm wishing you the most beautiful, happy birthday and trip to Necker Island coming for full circle. Thank you for sharing that story with us. And thank you for being here.
Yeah, I love geeking out about money with cool people. So thanks so much for having me here and having this conversation.